A local nonprofit hosted company volunteers to help revitalize a local community center. The group came in eager and energetic and spent the afternoon painting some walls bright colors. The nonprofit staff thanked them, and the volunteers left feeling proud of their hard work and sense of shared service. But here's what they didn't know. A few weeks later, another group of volunteers arrived, and they painted the same walls. It wasn't a mistake. It was a disconnect. The nonprofit didn't actually need the walls painted, but they didn't want to turn away the volunteers or their goodwill. This reminds us how good intentions alone don't always lead to meaningful impact. Painting the walls is a common phrase often used to describe well-intentioned but sometimes superficial acts of volunteering. And while these activities can be valuable, they can fail to address deeper systemic needs or align with the community's true needs and the nonprofit's long-term goals. So what's the secret to effective employee volunteerism? Well, you're about to find out. Welcome to Generosity at Work, a podcast that explores the ways in which generosity is at work in our workplaces and how it's at work in the world. I'm Keith Jennings, a community impact executive with Jackson Healthcare, and in this episode, we'll explore how businesses can move beyond feel-good volunteering to create partnerships that truly benefit communities and make a lasting difference. We'll answer some important questions, such as how can we do volunteerism well and avoid being just another team out painting the walls? And we'll dive into questions some are afraid to ask, like, can employee volunteerism negatively impact business productivity? Well, let's get started. Corporate volunteerism has been around a while, but how did it all begin? Volunteering actually dates back centuries to medieval times when communities supported one another through informal systems. By the 19th century, organizations like the YMCA, which was founded in 1844, formalized volunteerism, creating opportunities for people to serve in communities in organized ways. Company volunteerism, as we know it today, really took off in the mid-20th century when businesses started embracing corporate social responsibility. And since then, it's grown into a powerful force for good, a true win-win that creates real change in communities while helping businesses succeed. Employee volunteerism has hit some bumps in the road, especially in recent years. Overall, volunteerism has been declining for over a decade, and with shifting personal priorities and the rise of hybrid and remote work, it's become harder for businesses to rally volunteers. And when companies do manage to organize volunteer efforts, they sometimes unintentionally place extra stress on under-resourced nonprofits or end up frustrating their employees. In 2021, I read an article in Harvard Business Review by Jessica Rodell. She is the William Harry Wilson Distinguished Chair at the University of Georgia's Terry College of Business. The article was fittingly titled, "Volunteer Programs That Employees Can Get Excited About." Dr. Rodell's research focuses on corporate community engagement, and her goal is to uncover synergies so that these initiatives can be beneficial for companies, individual employees, and their communities. I reached out to her to learn more, and I asked her what led to her focus on this unique area.
So I worked in the nonprofit sector. I worked for the Muscular Dystrophy Association, and I worked for the Hands-On Network, which now is part of United Way, but it was essentially at that point a staffing agency that connected people and companies that wanted to be involved in the community with opportunities. And I loved that model in a way because the charitable organizations didn't have the time and the bandwidth to recruit and to background check and connect people to meaningful opportunities before they were moving on to something else. And this agency, through Hands-On, allowed people to try different things, allowed us to help the charitable organizations from having to do all that extra work every time. So I really liked that. But in doing that work, I realized how important companies could be in a community's efforts and how we really had very little guidance and understanding of how that relationship worked and how we could best structure it and what mattered for both stakeholders in that situation. And so the naive me went back to get my MBA to say, I'm going to figure this out and I'm going to do it better. And then about a year into my MBA, I was like, yeah, there's a lot to learn before we know how to do this better. And so I transitioned into doing my PhD specifically to study corporate volunteering, volunteering programs, and how to connect companies, employees, and communities together.
I had read reports on the recent challenges in corporate volunteer programs, so I asked Dr. Rodell about what's changed since starting her research on community engagement.
But I think what has become more obvious to me over the last 10 years is that the why really matters. The motives, the why a company does this and why a person does this matters. It affects how they do what they do and the impact of it. So much like we know broadly about motivations, right? Our intrinsic or pro-social reasons pay off more than extrinsic or selfish reasons, right? It affects our attitudes and our actions directly. So people motivated for the right reasons give more of themselves, they learn more about themselves, and then they feel better about themselves for what they're doing. But it also affects how other people perceive us, that coworkers and supervisors give more credit and recognition to somebody who's volunteering and engaged for the right reasons compared to people that are just doing it to look good or to get ahead. And I think the same is true for companies. I'm working on a qualitative investigation of a decade-long community engagement relationship between a company and the community here. And the key part for us is sincerity, that what this company does that makes it work at a deeper level than others in its industry or in the area is that they're doing it sincerely, and people notice that. The employees notice it, the consumers notice it, the charitable organizations they're working with notice it. And for me, that's been a little bit of a missing piece of the puzzle studying this from a workplace perspective is the beneficiary matters. What they're getting out of it. So often companies that are well-intentioned will walk in the door and have a day of service and maybe wind up doing more harm than good without realizing it. And they walk away thinking, this was great, my employees feel good, they're more committed, they're more likely to recruit other people to work here, and we have all their benefits, but they haven't met their main goal, which is to have a positive impact on those who need it in their community. And I think a lot of the organizations, the beneficiaries I work with in the community don't want to say that out loud. They're appreciative for the thought that counts, and they want to nurture that relationship. And in doing so, it hinders organizations and employees knowing, like, we could do better.
In her HBR article, Dr. Rodell listed the common ways company volunteer programs go wrong. So I asked her to share more.
I think those kind of fall in two big categories for me. One of them is they just do it to do it and not really for the right reasons. And I think that includes that just copying others, like, oh, my competitors are doing this and people in my industry are doing this. So in order to keep up, we should probably be doing this. And people tell us that we should. And probably a nicer version of that that's adjacent is I want to do good because it's going to be good for me and it's going to be good for my employees. And so that's, there probably is no true unselfish act, really. There's a combination of motives and benefits and everything. But I don't know that those approaches help people or help leaders create the right structure and culture and environment to have the benefits for the community and for the organization. And so I think that involves just copying what other people do. It involves holding on too tight to a pet project of a senior executive. And that one's a tough one to say because sometimes it makes sense, especially with smaller companies. If the company was founded around an issue and the purpose of the organization fits with what's important to that founder, then it all still does tie together. But if it's completely unrelated and now doesn't connect with employees or what the community actually needs, then it may not be the right bet.
Dr. Rodell emphasizes approaching this mindfully and purposefully, understanding what your goals are for your company, for your employees, and for the community. Another way businesses can go wrong is trying to measure the wrong things.
I just see so many employees or execs that lead these initiatives in companies that are fixated on the percent of employees that are participating. I think they use it as a litmus test for how successful the program is because it's tangible and quantifiable. And they could say, oh, we have 30% of people. And then they're like, oh, only 30%, that's not good enough. One of the findings in the work I've done that I love the most is showing that the culture and the impact of having these programs, it doesn't just affect the people who participate. You're not just recruiting, like the recruiting benefits of having this culture and a strong community presence is not just because you're going to wind up recruiting employees who want to participate. You're just recruiting employees who think you're a good company with good values that they would be proud to be affiliated with. And so you're already reaping the benefits of having the program, even if that person never participates. And then I think if we go the step further and force people to do it, well, now we negate a lot of the agency and the investment that people want to give in it. And I think we get distracted by focusing on that as an indicator of success.
Generosity at Work is made possible by Jackson Healthcare. As one of the nation's premier healthcare workforce companies, we're driven by our mission of improving the delivery of patient care and the lives of everyone we touch. Founded by our chairman and CEO, Rick Jackson, we began on a simple principle that talented professionals with a shared purpose can improve lives. Serving more than 10 million patients each year, we're proud to appear on the 100 Best Companies to Work For list by Fortune and the Companies That Care list by People. And we're always looking for bright professionals with a drive to serve others and grow professionally. If that's you, visit us at jacksonhealthcare.com.
One of the most common challenges I've observed in companies is the belief that volunteerism competes with productivity. If an employee is out of the office for a day volunteering, then they're not doing their job. So I asked Dr. Rodell to share whether her research revealed a negative side of community engagement and employee volunteering.
I can imagine, and I've talked with some business leaders that of companies of that size, that they want to do good, but it's a little bit scary because paper and pencil, it's an investment. It's time, it's finances, it's people that are going to be focused on something that's not directly contributing to the bottom line. And it's hard to point to, here is the absolute benefit of doing it. Because culture, which is one of the most important things. Like you said, once you have these cultures, they're self-fulfilling and reinforcing, and they grow to be something bigger and better. And when we see a company that's got it, we just know they've got it. And we can see all the benefits, but you don't really know how that was created, and you can't really quantify always every one of those benefits. This is kind of one of those things. This is these efforts and creating the right environment and culture for community engagement and connection with the community and generosity and the way people approach their work and each other is one of those fundamental core components that helps build that it factor. And so when I first started to look at this, it was driven by the fact that I was doing some volunteering on the side while I did my PhD, and my dissertation advisor thought of it as moonlighting. He was like, you are distracted from your main goal by doing this volunteering. And I argued, you are exactly the right audience because you are every business leader or manager that I'm trying to speak to say, yes, I see your concerns, but let me try to address them. And so it's why I wanted to look at and model both a positive and negative path on how being engaged in the community may affect what employees are able to bring to work every day with them. So I did look at whether it was a distraction, job interference, with the idea that, frankly, we have limited time. Time we spend doing one thing, we're not doing another thing. So on a surface level, yeah, if I'm off reading to my buddy for an hour once a week, that's probably 2 hours with travel involved that I'm not at my desk or answering my emails or doing something. And that disruption could affect my work productivity and engagement and commitment. On the flip side, resources are much more complex than time. And we know that I can stare at my computer for 10 minutes and get nothing done. And sometimes I could be walking to the water cooler and have a great idea and move my work forward an infinite step because I've made this connection when I wasn't really working at all. And so time is not always the best way to conceptualize our resources that we bring with us to work. It's more of our energy and our efficiency and our creativity. And those more complex resources are often much more influential on the bottom line of what employees bring and get done. And what we saw in this work is that, yes, even though volunteering may take time away, it adds much more in terms of those core psychological resources, energy, positive emotion, that people could bring back to work and translate into being more engaged, better citizens to people at work, more willing to help each other, more willing to voice ideas, more willing to attend optional work events, and on the flip side, less likely to be counterproductive. You don't take as many breaks, you don't show up late, you don't roll your eyes and ignore your supervisor's instructions, that it helps us kind of harness the best in ourselves and bring that best self to our work as well.
It's clear that employee volunteerism offers tremendous benefits to the business and community, but there are two approaches companies can take. The first is the structured employer-driven approach. The second is the unstructured employee-driven approach. So I asked Dr. Rodell, which is better, employer or employee-driven?
This project arose because it genuinely made me, I call it itchy with my doctoral students when I have a research question I don't know the answer to, and I want to figure out what's actually going on, because just from an outside perspective, I could see the benefits of both. I could see employee passion and engagement, and I know in the traditional management literature, the importance of agency and voice and empowerment, but also from the corporate perspective, having that cohesiveness, that structure, the mission, the purpose, and I see the benefits and the value of all those different components, but they would suggest different structures. One says you should have a top-down structure where companies pick a purpose and a goal, and they create the structure and the program, and the employees participate in it. And the other one says we have this bottom-up emergence where employees do the things that matter the most to them, and then we fill in the gaps and kind of become the glue that puts those all together. And I was curious about, well, is one of these better than another? And when companies ask me, what should I do? I don't stare at them with a blank face saying, I don't really know. So that's where this question came from. And the answer is probably not far from I don't know. It depends, because that's kind of the answer to everything is it depends. And both matter. So the top-down approach, I would say, is where companies, structure or influence their volunteering programs through policies and procedures. That's a more formal, structured day of service or a selection of a particular focus or group to focus on, and providing a variety of resources to support it: time off, flexible schedules, financial donations, logistics. Benefits of this are clearly the cohesiveness of the approach. There's a clear mission and a goal that can connect back to the company's goal and purpose and mission, so it can feed into reputation, because it's reinforcing why the company exists to begin with. It also can create some greater feeling of morale and connectedness between employees because they're volunteering with one another. It's opportunities to get to know each other and to connect with each other outside of the workplace, and they bring those experiences back to the workplace. On the flip side, the employee-generated program, this one's kind of grounded on the passion and the excitement of the individual employees. And so everybody's doing the thing that matters the most to them, and they feel grateful that a company supports their own values and goals, that whatever it is they care or are most passionate about, they're getting extra support from their company to add to that cause, which creates a sense of commitment and connection to the company. I also saw in that research that if you really want to build a sense of culture about volunteering, that like, this is who we are, this is what we do here, that the employee-driven stuff has a little bit of an edge on the company stuff, that the contagion and the connection between people with this passion is what spreads, whether explicitly or implicitly. You know, we either tell each other like, oh, I'm doing this thing and it's really exciting and I get to help these people, or I use my Tumblr that has the nonprofit organization listed on it, and I wear my t-shirt, or I have the photo on my wall, that people, I didn't study this in the paper, but I'd argue now that it's sincerity that's getting communicated about those, that creates this sense of, we are volunteers. We are not just employees. We are connected to our community. So in terms of that culture, the bottom-up stuff really counts. That said, without a direction or that overarching framework, it's harder to then also capitalize on the corporate level benefits, the reputational benefits, the industry level benefits. So that's why I say it depends, or maybe it's a combination of both, because, well, we want it all, Keith. We want to have what's best for the company, whether I as a person am still an employee there or not, but we also want to feel good about ourselves and our connection to the company when we're there. And so a little bit of both, especially if they complement one another, would be an ideal way to go.
So where should a small to mid-sized business start?
When I talk with companies that are, like we said, afraid to start these things, but want to, and I want to make the points, the surface level points that matter, which is, this is good for you. You're going to have company benefits in terms of recruitment and retention and reputation in your community, and your employees are going to work hard and stick with you. But yet also, you shouldn't just do it for that, because if you're just doing it for that, then you're probably not doing it right and you may not get those benefits. And so I'm going to tell you all those to like open the door to it and say, don't be so scared of trying this. But then once you're willing to give it a try, now let's talk about these deeper, more real things that are occurring for your employees, for your community, and have your focus be on moving the needle on those real issues, because that's really where you're going to see the benefit, the win-win-win for the community, for the employee, and for you as a company.
In this episode, we've learned that the secret to effective employee volunteerism starts with prioritizing meaning and doing it for the right reasons, because there are a number of ways to get this wrong, like forcing volunteerism or copying what other businesses do. We've also learned that a combination of structured employer-driven programming with unstructured employee-driven programming creates a sort of sweet spot for engaging and energizing employees. Fostering mindful employee volunteerism offers huge benefits to your company, its employees, and the community. It can unlock significant intangible value for your business. So what are you waiting for? All right, over these first 3 episodes, we've learned that business generosity doesn't start with giving money or sending volunteer teams into the community. It starts with being a neighbor and a leader in the community. Our generosity work flows from a place of sincere care and interest into community networks with a shared purpose and values. But what does it look like in the wild? What does a seemingly ordinary small business practicing extraordinary generosity look like? In the next episode, you're about to find out. Generosity at Work is produced by Jackson Healthcare's Love Lifts Community Impact Platform as a free resource for business leaders seeking to be a force for good in their communities. My sincere thanks to Dr. Jessica Rodell for her time, research, and insights into effective volunteerism. Learn more about Jackson Healthcare and its community impact work at jacksonhealthcare.com.